in conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music and gaming. Only on Hungama's Women Game Changers podcast.
Hi, welcome to Hungama's celebration of the 50 Game Changers 2023. Over this season, you will get to know women who are chalking their own path on their own terms and paving the way for the multitudes to follow in the field of entertainment across music, video and gaming. I'm Raunaq from Hungama, and it is my pleasure to welcome the versatile and the shockingly accomplished Avanti Nagral, who is literally using her superpower of music to change the world, one song at a time. Her passion for music is paralleled by her consistent commitment to changing societal norms. Avanti uses her training in Indian classical music as well as her dual degrees from Harvard in Global Health and Berklee College of Music to create a fusion and international sound that really speaks to the personal issues that matter to her and her generation. So I'm delighted to have with me a young woman who defines how to straddle both worlds and make it look effortless. Hi, Avanti.
Hi.
Thank you for taking the time to share the knowledge and shorten the learning curve.
Thank you so much for having me.
No, we're delighted to have you. And I think what's fantastic, Avanti, and I want to jump first straight into the journey, but I want to talk also about the fact that you were the very first person to do the dual degree at Harvard and Berkeley.
Correct.
So tell us about that. Tell us about getting in, getting accepted, making it work, and then getting ahead.
Absolutely. So the reason I was the first person to do this is because it frankly just didn't exist before I started the program. It had been in talks for several years, to do these interdisciplinary programs, and I'm really grateful it kind of started around the time I did. I remember when I got into Harvard, I had actually reached out to folks at Berkeley being like, hey, I'm going to be in the same city. Are there any ways I can get involved, events, things of that nature? And they're like, you know what? We've actually been considering this program. Let's talk. So I went and met some folks at Berkeley, and they're like, we've had this, program in the works. Do you think it would be something you'd be interested in? I said, absolutely. So they said, we were considering launching it a couple years from now, but we've seen that there's interest, so we might be launching it next year. And, you would have to still apply. You have to apply to both institutions separately, and then should you be accepted to both, then you get considered for, the dual degree program. And I was like, wonderful. The application processes at both couldn't be more different. At a place like Harvard or in liberal arts or an academic-based institution, it's very much based on, of course, your academics and grades, but you as a holistic person.
Right.
At Berkeley, being a music conservatory, it was just based on your musical talent and skill, right? So that was based on an audition. And I'm really grateful it ended up happening. So logistically, I started my first year at Harvard and then technically transferred into the program in my second year, which is why I ended up being the first person to do it.
So everyone sees the wins and they see the releases and the awards and they see the recognition. Everybody sees how fantastic it is to be a young musician making it on her own, speaking her mind. Nobody sees the misses and the passes and the rejections. And unfortunately, music is one of those creative industries that actually has a lot of it.
Absolutely.
So how do you kind of just pull yourself up, bring back the grit to be able to hear no 100 times and then pick up yourself 101?
I think it has to come from either a very internal sense of belief or a sense of purpose. It's taken me a long time to develop that belief, and I'm continuing to do it, but I've had a sense of purpose for a long time. And so I think I alluded to it earlier, right? Cared very deeply about health equity from a...
In fact, let's talk about global health. I mean, I know you went into Harvard wanting to study global health, but you've continued to make health a priority.
Absolutely.
In your life and the causes that you support. So tell me about that.
And it's in fact the reason I do what I do today, and I'm a musician, and I'll explain why. So all my grandparents are doctors, so I grew up around that space. But I personally have had a lot of health issues growing up. I was born with a heart condition. I have had several major and minor health issues. And this one instance when I was 15, this was right before my 10th grade board exams, right, which are of utmost value in India. I woke up one day and I wasn't able to see. And, thought it was a freak situation. Eventually had to immediately be rushed to the hospital. I had every single ophthalmologist, neurologist in the city. Some even flew down from other parts of the country to see me. Nobody could figure out what was wrong with me. Eventually, it was diagnosed as optic neuritis, which essentially means, an inflammation of the optic nerve. And gradually, over a period of months, the vision returned because it was reversible. I was on heavy medication. I was in the hospital for 2 weeks. And I remember coming home from the hospital and obsessively trying to do math because I felt like I couldn't remember anything else because it was a brain virus that had affected my memory and made it hazy. And I couldn't remember our English literature texts. I couldn't remember history. I couldn't remember any of that. So I was like, math, logic, I should be able to do this. Sitting there trying to do it, I can't. I break down completely. Because for the longest time, a lot of my identity had been rooted in being a good student, right, in this part. And I was like, who am I if not this? I'd also been doing several other things outside of academics, music being a huge one of them. And the only thing that I remembered, if that makes sense, was music. And so it became this thing that was incredibly healing for me.
Right.
And I realized its power as this tool, right? And I knew that no matter what I did in life, music had to be a part of it. And I wanted to figure out, so, for example, a lot of people in my life had cancer at that point, and there was a hospital close to my house. So I would just go every Sunday and I would chill in the pediatric oncology ward and just play music, hang out with kids who are around my age. And it became this thing where I said, this one small thing can act as a point of relief, right? Yes. I know it's helped me. What's beyond this? And so I became obsessed with the idea of combining, my passion for health equity, because I'd seen that I had been so fortunate enough to receive care in many situations that other people aren't. And I quite frankly would have been dead if I had not received that care at many stages of my life. So I became obsessed with this idea of how do you bridge that gap, right? And as a young person, as a teenager, I knew that this is part of where the agency comes in, my voice would count for some things. So I became passionate about what can you do as a young person? You can register to be an organ donor. You can learn first aid, CPR, basic things that you don't need, huge knowledge for, medical knowledge, none of that. And I was very passionate about those spaces, or just generally spreading awareness. Flash forward to when I was 18 and the theater show that I had mentioned earlier, where I was playing the lead. 4 days before opening night, we were at the director's house and we get a call from someone saying that they filed an FIR against us and they want to arrest all of us.
Oh no.
And we thought it was a prank call at first, turned out to be not. And it was this gentleman who wanted money, fame, power, and or all of the above. And used us as a scapegoat. This was back in 2015 when there was also, some Pakistani artists were being banned from coming into India. It was like a lot of that ban culture was starting. And it was interesting because what that taught me, like, it was crazy. Our opening night had 80 policemen in the audience to make sure no riots broke out. If anybody's interested, just Google Agnes of God controversy. Don't put my name, don't put anything else. And you'll see all these tons and tons of articles about it. Our opening night, we assumed we'd have, 500 to maybe 1,000 people. 15,000 people showed up. Because they were like, what is in this play?
So much buzz about
exactly.
it. So it's show business. There's nothing as good as bad news.
But it was very overwhelming for me because I just turned 18. So I was no longer off limits to the press, right? So I was getting a call every single day being like, Aapke jaan khatre mein hai, how do you feel about this situation? And it was a lot. But it taught me, the play, for example, touched upon themes like child abuse, mental health, things of that nature. And so what it taught me was art in and within itself is powerful. And it has that power to make a statement, right? And unlike other things, not only does it has the capacity to, change the way you think, but more importantly, change the way you feel.
Good art should make you feel uncomfortable. Great uncomfortable, terrible uncomfortable, disgusted uncomfortable. But
absolutely,
it must, because it's only when you're uncomfortable you're going to try and change.
Exactly. And so that's really where that shift came for me, where I said, I kind of want to be an artist, or I want to be in this creative world, and then use that. Hopefully one day I will have a platform, was my thought at the time. I did not ever think I'd be a YouTuber and all these things that came much later in life. And hopefully one day I'll have a platform where I can use that art to not just, connect with people emotionally, but also talk about these things and uplift that, right?
So actually, since you mentioned that, so the thing about social media is that it's two-way, right?
Absolutely.
You hear back from the people. And I think there are many people in your tribe who are inspired and positive and richer for it. There's also always, I find, with a lot of women in the arts, musicians, a lot of them, who end up getting a lot of hate for some of the things that they do when they talk about things like pleasure, when they talk about sex, when they dress a certain way. And I know some of the women, even from my 22 cohort, had this as a sort of consistent. How do you deal with that?
It comes from the same thought, if you will, of how to deal with the rejection in the industry in general, right? Which is you're used to hearing more no's than yeses in this space. And to me, it's been that sense of purpose that's guided me. So similarly, when I deal with hate, right, in this capacity, I recognize, one, that it often comes from a place of people's own insecurity and not mine. And they might be dealing with stuff. So honestly, I just wish them love. Second, what's important to me, however, is our community's safety. A lot of the people who are part of our community are fairly young. Yeah. And so I want to make sure. So there are cybersecurity tools in place, and things of that nature. But when somebody shares hate toward you talking about something that, in my opinion, is important or might be a taboo topic, such as, say, pleasure or sex or mental health or any of these things, that only encourages me to talk about it more because I recognize the need for it, right? When it comes to somebody attacking what they assume my character to be, that gets tricky because on bad days, that really hurts. Yeah. But that's when you have to also separate the person you are from the persona. Yeah. And recognize that you, say Avanti, is a fully 3D living, breathing human, and what you show to the world, even no matter how authentically close it might be to who you are as a person, is only a 2D representation because nobody is with you at all given points. They don't see that side to you. And even though I'm fairly intentional about making sure my social media is not simply a highlights reel of everything, right? I like to talk about the good, the bad, and the in-between because that's human. Yeah. But at the end of the day, that's all people see, right? And I have been memed, I have been roasted, I have been you name it. And so I get it if someone's perception of me is from a meme they've seen and a roast video and maybe some picture, they're going to think a certain thing about me without actually going and, going to a primary source or checking what a person's like. So I understand where it comes from. Does that make it easy? No. But to me, it's a part and parcel of being in this world. And more often than not, that hate is much smaller than the love. Okay.
So the good outweighs the bad.
The good outweighs the bad, but psychologically, we always focus on the thorns, right? Yeah. And so just reminding yourself that, hey, that might exist, but look at all of this love and appreciation and support. And more importantly, who are you, the person?
I think that's something that I hope our young readers and listeners do actually keep in mind because I think social media has created more concerns around mental health
Absolutely.
than I think any other change, technological, physiological, physical, environmental, before it. I really do hope that people keep that in mind because it's important. Yeah. And I think they need to remember that that's just one side of it and it's only one small slice of the community as well. So most Indian musicians opt for local content, films, that kind of music. Your lyrics speak to a different sound and a changing India. Does the fact that you're writing and creating a much more international sound, does that make it harder?
I don't know if it makes it harder. I think it's different, and whenever something is different or new, it takes a time for people to adjust to it, which is natural. So I think you just have to kind of push it a little bit more, if that makes sense. But you do it for the longer game, right? And when I say the longer game, whether that means later down success, or whether that just means I know that there is a growing population that cares about these things, and let me be in that space where I'm growing with them and we're doing it together, right? It's always uncomfortable, kind of like you were alluding to earlier, when you're at that brink of not being what people are used to. But eventually, if that's what feels most authentic to you, that's what you have to do, right? The other thing is, I think, because of our access to the internet exposure, just generally speaking, India as a country, we have so much talent and access and pool that our young consumers today, they are very intelligent and we can't undermine their intelligence, right? And more than anything else, I've realized that they're personality-based consumers. What I mean by that is you can be a singer, you can be a dancer, you can be absolutely anything. And that matters, but only to a certain degree. They care more about who you are, what you stand for, and everything else associated with that, right? And so I'm fairly confident that even if the sound doesn't catch on in that larger sense, even if it's not really ever been about that for me. It's been about how do you use whatever tools at your disposal to create small to big impact, and how do you build community along the way. And I'm confident that whether it's from me or any of my peers who are, trying to push this space, or it happens 5 to 10 years down the line by someone else, it's all of our efforts collectively that have opened up those doors and created that space.
Absolutely. We all stand on the shoulders of giants.
Exactly.
Where have you gotten your greatest support from? I mean, has it been people in the industry? Have there been, has somebody turned around and helped you up one rung of the ladder? Mentors, role models?
I've been grateful to have a lot of mentors. I would say family's been very supportive, friends, my team. Took a very long time to find the team that I have, and they're incredible. In the industry, it's interesting. I've definitely had support from the industry. In fact, I'm not just saying this.
Congratulations! Apart from being on our list, you also received the Artist Allowed IMA Award for Rising Star.
Yes,
so congratulations!
Thank you so much. I was just going to say, and I'm genuinely not saying that just because I'm here. Hungama as an entity has been super supportive of us from day one, and I'm really grateful for that. Industry-wise, it's interesting because I fall into multiple categories, right? And that can be confusing for a lot of people. So there's folks in the music industry who are like, oh, she's an artist, but she's also a creator. And so they don't really know what to make of me. Similarly, people in the content space are like, but she also sings. And so I become this very strange person in this in-between, which is okay. I've always been in that in-between. I went to 2 colleges. Yes. I've lived in 2 countries. It's just I'm used to living in that. It's just sometimes I feel like kind of want to just breathe and exhale and be like, okay, someone validates in some capacity. But that's okay. I recognize that when you're trying to build in multiple spaces, you're not going to fit into the boxes and prior notions that people have. So you're just going to be harder to digest. And therefore, it'll be harder for the industry to ratify you in ways that say, I hope for or want to, but eventually down the line it will, right? I think in terms of support, the biggest support has been from the community as well. Someone comments on a video of yours or sends you a message or an email about a song of yours. They've taken out time from their incredibly busy days to interface with something that you have created so small in this world, in this microcosm, when they have millions of options. And not only taken out the time to listen to it, engage with it, watch it, whatever, but to share with you how it's impacted them. If that's not support, I don't know what is, and that to me is the most beautiful thing.
Okay. Now, tell me about the causes closest to you. Tell me about how you think other people can use their voices. What can people do to get involved, support? You've been on the receiving end of accolades over the last couple of years. How can people in those cohorts and networks get involved? But first, tell me about the causes that are most important to you. Absolutely.
I think in general, it's about helping people amplify their voices. That's really important to me. And I've realized, right?
I'm delighted because that's the exact definition of what we're trying to do here is just amplify and celebrate women that often don't get celebrated because we tend to be shyer also about putting ourselves out
Absolutely.
there. Yeah.
Or if we do, then we are seen in other ways, right?
Yes.
As compared to our male counterparts. There's a lot of things that we don't talk about in our cultural fabric because we have this idea that they are taboo or unsanskari or whatever it might be, right? Things around the nature of, say, sex or mental health or menstruation or things that we just don't have knowledge about, such as climate change and how it really affects us. I care very deeply about equity, and that applies across health and education and all of these things, gender, all of that. And so these are kind of issues and causes that I center around. But the most important thing for me, and I would phrase it as social education, right? When we talk about education, sure, school, important, skills, important, but do we really know how to be inclusive, right? Do we get proper sex ed in school? Absolutely not. Do we understand mental health at a baseline level? Not necessarily. We're understanding, perhaps illnesses and diseases, but we're not understanding that our mental health is as important as our physical health and how to take care of it and nurture it. Why, when we have education about periods, for example, girls are educated about it, boys are left in the dark? I think it's just this nature of social education that applies across everywhere, right? For example, do we know how to react if there was a fire in this building? Do we really know what to do? Do we know how to do our taxes? Do we know how to do basics of life? And I think that is really, really important. And I underestimated the power of conversation for the longest time. Yeah. But I've realized just talking about something can turn wheels in someone's head and start to change a mindset. And so I saw that power with music. I see that power with conversation. It's just the baseline spreading awareness, and then beyond that, creating resources. And for us, it's really important to create resources, community things. So for example, when we talk about climate change, it's not just about, okay, clean up your environment. We organize beach cleanups. We organize drives. We, try to connect people with resources for separating their waste and figuring out ways in which they can amplify in their local communities. Similarly with, sex education, mental health resources, we released a song called Suntolo 2 years ago. And it's a song about mental health. And our video, we did 2 video assets for it. One touched upon kind of the feelings one has regardless of the life background they're going through. And the other one was with 25 young Gen Z creators, just to amplify that message. We recognize that anybody who watched those or listened to the song might feel inspired to share their own stories and struggles. Right. And we didn't want them to feel alone. One is solidarity, but the second is also help and access. So we partnered with 50 different mental health organizations across India, and all of whom provided subsidized or free therapy. And, till date, on my Instagram, for example, we have a mental health highlight. You go to any of those entities, you say Suntolo, they will help you out, right? And for us, it was really important because we knew a lot of people were coming with nowhere else to go. They felt more comfortable sharing their struggles on a random person's internet page than in their own homes.
Yes.
And so for me, it's really just been about that. It's been about how do you build community beyond that. We're constantly verifying resources. We're constantly in those spaces and, longer term have aspirations to make sure that we're able to support that community. One of the other things that I do is we've built a studio space in Bombay, which is a multi-purpose creative space. And so you can, kind of go there and do any kind of creative expression, music, dance, theater, film, photography, videography. But the idea is also to uplift young talent and create a safe and fun environment. So whether that's in the physical manifestation of entities like that or in the, network manifestation of just us creating supportive environments, that's really what it is. And part of that comes from the fact that I'm an older sister. I have a younger brother, and so I've always had that Didi hat on. And I would say 60% of my audience calls me some version of Didi Akka, and I love it to pieces because it really feels like that, right? What I love and appreciate so much about our Indian culture is we have this sense of apnapan, yes. Someone we feel close to will give them a familial tag. And that's so beautiful, right? Because it makes us feel like we're not strangers, we're not alone.
Yes, that's true. And, while you were talking about equity, I say this unpopularly so in some of my personal communities and networks, that we are bringing up our daughters to go and change the world. Are we bringing up our sons
Absolutely.
to be good partners to those women who are going to go out and change the world? Because I see mamas, and I'm sure that, I'm part of the problem, but I see mamas doing everything for their boys. It's never occurred to them that they will someday have to do some of these things themselves. They don't see it in their home, the parents. And so I think just from pop culture, social norms, girls know when they grow up, there's adulting. Adulting also means looking after your space, looking after yourself, personal, mental, friends, nurturing relationships, and getting the job done. I really feel that we should be spending time bringing up our boys to be excellent partners to those women and equal partners to those women.
Absolutely. And also empathetic individuals. One thing that really warmed my heart, I thought that when I started talking about these things in a more public way on the internet, that a lot of the folks who would resonate would be, say, teenage girls or young women. A lot of it's young men. And I was surprised at first. For example, whenever we talk about, say, menstruation, 80% of the viewership is men. and they're all often below the age of 25. And that used to confuse me initially, but I realized they have nowhere else to go.
No, and even in the 2020s, I hear myths that they believe.
Absolutely.
About things that are okay. I know young girls who don't enter the kitchen still. In a city like Bombay, I know people who think that you cannot have sex on those days for fear of fever, viral, flu, death.
And it's bursting these myths that's so important. And what always warms my heart is seeing young boys. I would say, I don't know the percentage, but a lot of our fan pages, for example, are run by young boys. And that surprised me at first. At first I thought, is it young boys who are perhaps lusting after someone? And I realized, no, they feel this familial sense of connection. And many of them have reached out saying things like, a lot of the things you've talked about, or, your songs are about, or even say some of the things I do with my grandmother, they have changed the way I think because I've grown up around these toxic masculine figures. Correct. And just seeing this possibility has broken me out of that loop. And I'm like, wow, that is incredible, right? To see that someone can feel that just from
that's
a video.
A material difference.
It's a material difference. But my point is, they see that from a video, they see that from a song, someone they feel connected to. Imagine if we do this in our homes.
Yeah.
Imagine if we do this in our schools. Imagine if it's an everyday situation, As an older sister to a younger brother, I have been very adamant that he is highly aware of all these things in life. And, hopefully, again, as a sister, like you said, making sure he one day might be a partner to somebody, or even not in the context of partnership, just be a wonderful, empathetic human being in this world, right? But yeah, we really need to focus on that because so many things, right? We try to put into place, as you said, protectionist measures for a woman's safety. But it needs to start with, how do we make sure they don't feel unsafe in the first place?
Correct.
And how do we do that at the root?
This is what I try and tell everybody is that the goal is that you don't need to have women's safety rules.
Exactly.
But have you dealt with, in the music industry, in the space, even in dealing with, have you dealt with the bro culture? Have you seen opportunities that you thought you would have gotten, whether it's not headlining or not getting the sort of in the sequence, not getting paid as much for a performance? Have you
1000%. It's unfortunate, but it's true. A lot of this industry, particularly in the gatekeeper space, right? You might see a lot of female artists, but people who are decision makers in the back end, in the business side, it's still very, very boys' club. And I've found it's sad, but there's been situations in which I, for example, know a lot about the industry, know a lot about the space. It was very important to me because this was a new world that I learned about the space. And for a lot of men, they just weren't used to artists, especially young women. And when I say young, I was pretty young at the time, 19, 20, 21, who knew their shit, for lack of a better word. So I was perceived as, oh, she's very chalu, she's very cunning, she's, very shrewd. And if I was a guy, I would have been lauded as being so smart and exactly.
Absolutely. It's the assertive, demanding.
Absolutely. And I knew what I wanted, and I worked with a lot of men initially in the industry. My team right now is actually pretty much all female. And that wasn't necessarily intentional, but I'm glad it worked out in that capacity. Not to say that, there's incredibly supportive men in the industry, for sure, but this boys' club where that kind of trade-off happens, where you get excluded from opportunities, is really, and you'll see it. Today, I still see lineups for certain festivals and things. I'm like, did no one realize there's no women on this?
Yeah.
Did no one? And it's not a question of merit is important. No one's denying that, right? But zero? And nobody's saying, okay, create a quota or a representation category. That is important to make sure you have that empowerment. There's enough talent. And I can show you, I'm not talking about myself, I can name you 100 names who deserve to be on this lineup, And the pay thing is a huge thing as well. Also, in terms of just general presence and maintenance, we had this expectation, for example, in our entertainment industry generally, of our women to be presentable in a certain kind of way, which means we often have to spend much more
hair,
makeup, etc. Right? And even when we're on stage, a guy standing there strums 3 chords, girls are like, oh my god. A woman standing there has a certain presence, but she has to do 10 times more on stage to be as engaging.
Right.
I even realized that with audience, right? For example, unless I am portrayed, or perhaps, some men are not like that, but if I'm not an object of desire, I may or may not be off the natural, and because of my sound as well, I'm not necessarily a young man's go-to artist, right? They might be from a popularity perspective.
It gets impacted.
Exactly. So they might be more, and just typically trends-wise, young men tend to be more into hip-hop and, certain kinds of genres, which is not where my sonic sound is. Right. And if I'm not kind of portraying myself as an object of desire, they're not necessarily going to be looking in that direction, right? When I say young men, I'm talking more about in their 20s and 30s. Younger women around my age, often they'll feel threatened because we grew up with this scarcity mindset that there's such little space for all of us that we feel threatened by someone who we feel is growing in some capacity, right? So they're not your natural audience either. So I found that it's often people who are younger than you who feel somewhat inspired or whatever it might be. And it's very, very fascinating. And I'll see that in ways in which people interact, not just with me, but generally speaking, right? It's why Taylor Swift is in her 30s and her strongest fans are still 16.
Yeah.
Because it's that aspirational space and mindset. Whereas you might have, a Justin Bieber, right? Who has age group across the board. And it's fascinating.
Who's written a lot of songs about a lot of relationships too.
Exactly. But is never scrutinized for it.
Yeah.
I had a very interesting experience last year where I had a very public breakup, and I released a song after, and then subsequently an album later on. And when I released this song, so many of the comments were fascinating, where it was like, oh my God, she's monetizing her breakup by writing a song. And there were there was this conversation in the comments being like, so you have no problem when Taylor Swift or Ariana Grande or any of these people or Justin Bieber does this, but you have a problem when it's an Indian artist, number one. Number two, that is the purpose of art and artistry, to express yourself through song and music and use your emotional expression, right? And it's very fascinating to see that discourse. And what I've realized about our cultural fabric when it comes to music is Indians love emotion. But we're so used to perceiving it in the context of fantasy. So many of our film songs are about love, heartbreak, all of that, but we're used to seeing it picturized by somebody, right. So it's fantasy. Or we're used to seeing it in reality TV. But when it's somebody who has their own sense of agency, their own platform, and their own literal voice and agency, then we get intimidated because we're like, oh my God, this person had a negative experience and they're talking about it and they're creating to it. I'm scared now. You know what I mean?
No. I think also there's a lot of judgment. Oh,
absolutely.
She's now broken up, which means that, she's been rejected. There is still, I find, it's changing, I think, I won't even say Bombay, Delhi, Bangalore. I'll say South Delhi, South Bombay, South Bangalore, or at least, those areas. I think women are finally being able to talk about the fact that I'm having a relationship or I had a relationship. Yeah. It didn't work out. I have moved on. I am now, either in another relationship or happy to explore another relationship. And I think the young women are reaching a point where they are comfortable talking about it. Their mothers are still trying to figure out. Tell me, one of the things that I notice is talent. You have women artists, so they're singers. The minute in the music industry, outside of the singers, there are fewer women in other roles who are also doing songwriting or sound engineering, composing, editing. Even in the business of music, I mean, we had a conversation just the other day with Preeti Nair from Universal, who's doing a great job. But just not enough women are, on the other aspects of music. That still continues to be largely men. You also do a fair amount of your own composing, songwriting. I know you collaborate with some people in the team, but so does that feel a little bit more lonely?
As processes, those are lonely, right? When you're composing, writing, you're often in a small space in a studio. So yes, for sure. I think part of it is, to get people to be supportive of young women getting into the arts in general is hard. Artistry still has that, public recognition. But if, I know a lot of women who've tried to go to their families or whomever is their support system and say, hey, I want to do this engineering thing. Because these spaces are so male-dominated, people are concerned about their safety, and so it becomes this catch-22 that you don't have enough options,
right.
And you don't have that.
enough women. It's
exactly.
You and 14 guys. You want to do production. It's great. It's exciting.
Yeah, but you have that space. I think it's changing. I do think it's important. That's why I appreciate that y'all are spotlighting people, in these spaces, because we often don't know.
Yeah, even DJs.
Absolutely. And I think we just need to make these things more accessible, right? We need to showcase that there are options. Part of it, and I've seen a lot of the back-end stuff of the music and entertainment industry involves long hours or involves odd hours. And so I can understand that people's concern, again, it's often motivated by safety or pay or whatever that might be, right? And therefore, people don't get pushed into those spaces. Also, it's the same kind of bias we have that women can't do STEM and women can't do these more hard technical things. That's why you don't see as many female engineers. You don't see as many female producers, right? So I do think it is important to spotlight so many of the ones that do exist so that, A, we see that. I think second is also making sure that there's mentorship systems in place, right? There are collectives like, say, a Women in Music or others that have that, but we need that more and more. And I think that it's important to also hire people. I released an EP in 2021 called Double Standards, and it was around themes of gender equity. And everybody on that project, especially when we created the visuals, everybody we hired was a woman. And it wasn't, we're doing it just because we want women. That was very important to us, but obviously merit was important. All of these other things were important. But it's because so many of them were like, we've never been in a room where there's more than one of us.
They just gravitate towards the project, the passion.
Exactly. And you just feel the energy during all of those shoots was amazing because everyone felt so lovely and comfortable and safe. And, and I'm like, this is sad that...
Empowered.
Yeah, empowered. And it's sad that we don't feel this every day.
Yeah.
So
one of the things about the music industry is networking.
Yeah.
You've got to know the right people, the gatekeepers, the labels, the festival managers, the guys who are actually going to be the ones suggesting singers, especially young singers, to established music composers. Also, the other entities in what is now suddenly becoming a very music tech space.
Yeah.
How do you make sure that you're connected with the right people? Do you take time out to attend conferences? Is it only when you're a speaker? Do you also go as a learner?
Yeah, I think it's important to be in those spaces, right? So attending people's shows, attending conferences, attending these spaces, building your own genuine connections with people. And this goes for any form of networking, right? If you approach it with, I have to network, you're going to come across as a, power-hungry person. If you approach it as, hey, I'm here to learn.
Right.
I want to find mentorship, or I want to make friends, whatever, then you also approach it with a slightly different, you don't feel as stressed about it, number one. And number two, people are more open to that, right? The other thing is, in this industry, there's a lot of the subtle off networking that happens, and unfortunately, a lot of it involves substance consumption and things of that nature. That's just something I don't participate in whatsoever. I don't drink, I don't like none of these things. So you won't find me at a bar, and that's the way I have become friends with someone. So you have to just treat it differently. The other thing I would say is also social media has democratized the space where your merit stands for itself. So while you may or may not have access to certain networks, not everybody does, putting yourself in spaces where your merit and talent can speak for itself is huge. And you'll find that people will often come to you. But it's about finding spaces, creating opportunities. Some of the people who I'm very close to in the industry, I've just met, like you said, at some of these events, things like that. We've just started talking. I might have had an opportunity that I thought would be cool for them, offered them something, vice versa. Not in a transactional manner, but in a way of like, how do we all support each other and help and amplify, right? And that's really what it is.
So, Avanti, how did you get your big inflection? I mean, the fact is there are a lot of youngsters putting their content out there. They're doing it. They're trying to do it regularly. They put up their own content. They follow it up with a whole bunch of covers. They're trying to get, they get to 5,000 views kind of thing. And then, so how did you get that big inflection? What kind of was the big flash?
There was no big inflection. It was all these small micro spikes, right? And it was also, a lot of it is experimentation. Because you don't know what works with people, audiences, but also what feels authentic to you. It has to tick all those boxes. For me, some of that came from some of the conversations, some of that came from some of the music, some of that came from all of these places. And it really is you figuring out spaces and places that are most natural for you. What I mean by that is I knew that I was likely a better speaker than I was a dancer, right? So while I might have seen peers doing dances to songs and things of that nature, that just wasn't what felt like a fit for me. So then YouTube became a natural kind of extension, right? As opposed to, at the time, TikTok when it existed or things of that nature. Also, collaboration is huge and it matters a lot, right? And I collaborate with so many artists in the music industry, so many creators and creatives. And one, you make amazing friends. Two, you also are able to doubly amplify your work.
Right.
And you learn a lot, right? And so yes, the consistency matters, all of that matters, but the more collaborative you are, the more you're focusing. I kind of like to think of your audience, if you will, in concentric circles, where your core is your superfans. These are people who are always there.
Who will catch almost everything. All your new content.
Absolutely. And will come to shows, buy things, etc., etc. Then you have all these layers. Then you have your discoverable audience, which is people who don't know who you are yet.
Yes.
In my opinion, you cater to those two and nobody else. Because everybody else comes in and out of these layers. Right? So how do you cater to your superfans? These are people who have taken out time from their lives to be there for you. Respond to their comments, their DMs. Make them feel seen. Make them feel heard, appreciated. I know probably top 100 people by name, their age, where they live. I've met many of them. Because that's a human connection, right? And then the discoverable audience is, okay, this is people who don't know about me yet, but I think that, we might be a match. So how do I gear it toward them? So whether that's simple optimization tools like using, hashtags or those types of things, or simply a lot of artists feel like, oh my God, why do I have to use content as a tool to promote? But part of it is people don't know who you are. How are they going to discover it? It's what the chances of something being randomly discovered and going viral is 1 in a million.
Right.
You kind of have to put it out there and showcase it in different ways, whatever feels most authentic to you. For some people, they're not as comfortable putting themselves out there, but you can share the process, right? You can share so many aspects to whatever feels most authentic to you. And like you, who's been in this space for 25 years, you're still learning. Even if I've been in the music industry for the past 4 or 5 years, in the content space for the last 2.5. Every single day you still have to innovate and you still have to kind of be in that space and learn.
Okay. Tell me some incidents that make the struggle worth it.
So many. Truly, a lot of it was when meeting people in person, right? Or I did a show in Bangalore recently. It was at a festival and there was a lot of logistical issues. So I was supposed to go on stage at 4, ended up going on at 5:30. Getting there was a mess, all of that. There were these girls, twins, who have been major super fans, really supportive, and they were late because of traffic. So they showed up at 4:30 and they didn't see me on stage and they started sobbing, profusely crying. People were trying around them to control them, and this is a sea of thousands of people. And then I showed up a little while later and I went on stage and I was so stressed, really pissed with all the logistics of this, all of that. And that made it all worth it. The second I walked in, they screamed my name. They were so... And I was like, all of this has happened so that they could see this.
Yeah.
All this has happened so that this community could be there, right? I see it in ways when we have shows and meetups, when people send you... I remember when I released a song, Give Up, right, about a relationship ending. This person... We had thousands of people reach out about their own personal stories. This one girl reached out about her parents having a divorce and how this song got her through that. And then sharing intimate details. I've met people and they've brought my favorite dessert and written me handwritten letters, and I'm like, I don't deserve, because this feels very not that I don't deserve it in that sense, but it's wow, the fact that this exists is just anything else I'm complaining about. I need to be grateful for this.
Yes. Yes, it is. Okay, Avanti, thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was lovely talking to you and learning from you, and congratulations. We look forward to the many mountains you still have to climb. This is Raunaq from Hungama, thanking you for tuning in. The goal with us is to celebrate and create more role models, but also to amplify the voices that must be heard, choices that should be talked about, and achievements that make you dizzy. Stay with us while we meet women in entertainment who aren't just playing the game, they're changing it.
In conversation with some fascinating ladies who've changed the game in the world of video, music, and gaming. Only on Hungama's Women Game Changers podcast.